What if the smartest person in the world was still in elementary school? That was the question that broke the internet. It showed up first as a headline on a small tech blog in the early hours of a quiet Tuesday morning. Within hours, it was on the front page of Reddit, trending on X, formerly Twitter, and climbing YouTube's algorithm like wildfire. But the real firestarter wasn't just the headline, it was the video. The video was 4 minutes and 23 seconds long. Shot vertically, on what looked like an iPhone. The frame was simple, a small classroom, chalkboard in the background, a kid, maybe 9 or 10, standing in front of it. His hair was messy, his shirt had dinosaurs on it, and he spoke like a TED speaker who had accidentally been born in the wrong generation. But it wasn't his confidence that shook people. It was what he said. If Neuralink continues using electrode-based mapping without dynamically adaptive feedback loops, the kid said, pointing at a messy sketch of a brain on the board, it'll cap out its accuracy rate at 84.7%. That's a ceiling Elon Musk isn't ready to admit yet. He wasn't reading off a script. No teleprompter. No parent whispering off camera. This was pure, raw thought, coming from a child. And then came the line that lit up every comment section on the internet. If Elon wants to solve the human-AI symbiosis problem, he needs to stop thinking like a machine, and start listening like a human. Mic drop. Within the next 12 hours, every major tech news outlet had picked up the story. Who is the kid that roasted Elon Musk? Is this the next Einstein? A child outsmarts the world's richest man. Elon didn't respond. Not on X. Not in interviews. Not even in closed shareholder meetings. But insiders at Tesla and SpaceX leaked a different story. Elon Musk had seen the video. And he didn't laugh. He watched it 3 times in a row. Then, in the middle of a strategy session on satellite mesh optimization, he stood up and said one sentence that sent chills down the spine of everyone in the room. Find me that kid. Let's rewind. Leo Reynolds was 10 years old. He lived in Lincoln, Nebraska, a town more famous for college football and cornfields than for futuristic debates on AI consciousness. He wasn't from Silicon Valley. His mom taught high school math. His dad was a librarian. They had a rescue dog named Waffles, a backyard trampoline, and a rusty pickup truck that coughed every time it started. Leo wasn't on TikTok. He didn't care about Fortnite. His version of a good time was designing quantum circuit simulations on a dusty Chromebook in the school library, using software that even most PhD students found a little too intense. But he did have one soft spot, YouTube. His tiny channel, called Brain Break, had a few hundred followers, mostly science geeks and curious high schoolers. He'd post breakdowns of complex systems, from black hole thermodynamics to the flaws in electric grid infrastructure. The Neuralink video? That was supposed to be a one-off. A rant, really. A frustrated explosion of thoughts after binge-watching a Neuralink Q&A Elon gave at MIT. I didn't think anyone would watch it, Leo would later say. I just had to say it out loud. But someone did watch it. Millions, actually. Including Elon Musk himself. And when Musk said, "Find me that kid," things moved fast. First, it was a polite email from a Tesla HR rep, then, a cryptic phone call from a blocked number, Mr. Musk would like to arrange a visit. Then came the black SUV that showed up on Leo's street, 2 men in suits stepping out, asking if Leonardo Reynolds would accompany them to California, parental supervision required, of course. At first, Leo thought it was a prank. His mom cried. His dad went full CIA mode, asking to see IDs, contracts, anything official. When the documents came in, with SpaceX letterhead and a Tesla legal team signature, they realized this was no joke. Leo packed one bag, a pair of sneakers, a hoodie, 3 notebooks, and a Rubik's Cube he could solve blindfolded. They arrived at the SpaceX compound in Hawthorne, California, under heavy security. The building looked like something out of a movie, glass, steel, and rocket parts lining the halls. And then, there he was. Elon Musk. In the flesh. Waiting. Not surrounded by a boardroom. No entourage. Just him, standing in front of a whiteboard, holding a dry erase marker. He turned and said one thing. "Leo, I've seen your video. Now convince me you're not just clever, you're right." That's where our story begins. Not with a hero. Not with a villain. But with a question. One asked not by a scientist, or a billionaire, or a university. But by a 10-year-old boy. What if the smartest person in the world isn't even old enough to vote? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Leo Reynolds was born on a Tuesday. Not that the day mattered, but his mother always liked to say, "Tuesdays bring quiet thinkers." And Leo? He didn't cry when he came into the world. He blinked. He stared. He watched. By the time he was 6 months old, he could mimic full sentences. Not baby talk, real words. Full-on conversations like he'd been studying the adults around him and decided, "Okay, I'm ready now." His first sentence, according to family lore, wasn't "Mama" or "Dada." It was, "What's the moon made of?" Leo's mom, Erin, was a high school math teacher. She had a dry sense of humor and a brain like a steel trap. His dad, Carl, was a quiet librarian with a love for dusty biographies and old NASA documentaries. They were smart, no doubt. But nothing prepared them for Leo. By the time he was 2, Leo had taken apart every remote control in the house, reassembled 3 of them, and created a prototype for a universal volume adjuster, which was really just 2 remotes duct taped together with a paperclip circuit bridging the batteries. At age 3, he read a brief history of time, well, more like stared at the pages and asked his dad questions until Carl had to Google answers at 2 a.m. just to keep up. By 5, Leo built a working model of the solar system out of Lego and servo motors, complete with orbital rotation timers. Not from a kit. From scratch. He was brilliant. But brilliance doesn't make childhood easier. In preschool, he was labeled difficult. He didn't color inside the lines, not because he couldn't, but because he questioned why everyone should. He got into arguments with teachers over why dinosaurs had feathers, or whether time was linear. He was sent home once for telling another kid that Santa Claus was a capitalist construct designed to encourage early consumerist behavior. That didn't go over well. Public school was worse. By first grade, Leo had tested out of every math, science, and reading level they had. The district didn't know what to do with him. They tried gifted programs. Tutors. Enrichment schedules. He blew through them like warm butter. Eventually, the school counselor told Erin and Carl, "You might need to consider homeschooling. We're just not equipped." So they did. It wasn't easy. Erin cut her hours down. Carl worked weekends. They bought second-hand textbooks, downloaded MIT OpenCourseWare, and turned their garage into what Leo called the lab. It had a 3D printer, a soldering station, whiteboards on every wall, and more coffee cups than any child should be allowed near. Leo thrived. But he also ached. He didn't have many friends. He wasn't lonely exactly, his mind was too busy for that, but he knew he was different. He could feel it in the silences after he spoke, the way adults gave him that look, the way other kids drifted away when he got excited about quantum entanglement or the ethics of AGI. His parents tried their best. Family game nights. Movie marathons. Backyard astronomy sessions. Still, Leo often stared up at the stars and whispered to the dark, "I think too much. And I don't know how to stop." Everything changed at age 8, when Leo discovered YouTube. Not the cat videos. Not the pranks or dances or ASMR. No, Leo found science communicators. Engineers. Coders. Thinkers. People like Mark Rober and Lex Friedman and Sabine Hossenfelder. He started his own channel, Brain Break, with just a Chromebook, a cheap webcam, and a dream, to explain big ideas in small words. His first video. Why black holes aren't actually black. It got 34 views. Most of them were his parents. But Leo didn't care. He made videos every week. He made them for the version of himself who had felt lost at age 4, 5, 6, who wished someone, anyone, had explained things without talking down to him. His audience grew slowly. A few high schoolers subscribed. Then a physics teacher in Oregon shared his video with a class. Then it showed up on a subreddit for autodidacts. Then came that video. The Neuralink video wasn't supposed to go viral. Leo had just watched an old Elon Musk presentation where Elon talked about brain-computer interfaces, and something about it bugged him. The data pipeline. The latency. The missing empathy in the whole approach. So Leo grabbed his markers, drew a diagram, hit record, and spoke his mind. Not as a challenge. Not for clicks. Just because his brain wouldn't shut up until he did. He uploaded it. Went to bed. Ate waffles the next morning. By lunch, he had 40,000 views. By dinner, his inbox was flooded. By midnight, CNN called. His mom unplugged the internet. Leo didn't know it yet, but that video had entered the inboxes of people who matter. Not just nerds. Gatekeepers. Think tank directors. Patent lawyers. VCs. The FBI's Emerging Talent Task Force. The White House's chief science advisor. And, of course, Elon Musk. When Leo got the call that Elon wanted to meet him, he thought it was a joke. When the SpaceX SUV rolled into his driveway, he thought it was a dream. And when he stepped into the sleek white corridors of the Hawthorne compound, his heart pounded in his chest like a snare drum. He wasn't scared. He was ready. But in the corner of his mind, buried behind all the equations and blueprints and what-ifs, was still that little whisper. You're just a kid. What if they laugh? He stood outside the door. Inside, Elon Musk was waiting. This wasn't a YouTube video. This was real. And for the first time in his life, Leo Reynolds was about to meet someone who might think at his speed. But who would lead, and who would follow? When Elon Musk finally sat down with Leo Reynolds, it wasn't the conversation he expected. He'd prepared. Reviewed every transcript, watched the Neuralink video a dozen times, even dug through Leo's tiny YouTube archive. He anticipated precociousness. Maybe even arrogance. What he didn't expect was clarity, raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable clarity from someone who still had baby teeth. The two sat facing each other in a small conference room at SpaceX. No assistants. No PR. Just Elon with a black marker in hand, Leo with a juice box and a mind spinning at Mach 10. Elon broke the silence first. So. You think I'm wrong? Leo didn't flinch. I don't think you're wrong. I think you're incomplete. Elon blinked. That's a new one. You're optimizing the system for input latency and neural fidelity. But you're ignoring user-side adaptability, Leo said, already scribbling an equation on the glass wall. The brain isn't a machine. It's chaos. Beautiful chaos. You can't predict it with just data. You have to teach it how to teach the interface how to learn it back. Elon leaned forward, intrigued. Challenged. But beneath that surface fascination was a ripple of something else. Concern. Later that day, Elon sat alone in his office, the windows dimmed against the setting sun. The conversation with Leo replayed in his mind like a glitch in a simulation he couldn't debug. He'd built his life around thinking 10 steps ahead. About space, AI, energy, transportation, even human consciousness. He'd met Nobel laureates, astronauts, hacker prodigies, monks in the Himalayas. He'd faced skeptics, critics, and cynics from every continent. But never this. Never a child who could reverse engineer his thought process in real time and then add 2 more layers he hadn't considered yet. He opened a secure Slack channel and typed a single message to his inner circle. We need to talk about Leo Reynolds. Back in Nebraska, Leo was unaware that he'd just triggered DEF-CON 2 level curiosity inside one of the world's most powerful tech ecosystems. He was sitting cross-legged on a hotel bed, rewatching 2001, A Space Odyssey for the 3rd time that week. Waffles, the family dog, lay curled up at the foot of the bed. His mom was asleep, his dad reading a tattered sci-fi novel in the chair by the window. On the TV screen, HAL 9000 whispered, I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave. Leo smiled to himself. Classic alignment problem, he muttered. The next morning, Leo was invited back to SpaceX. This time, it wasn't a private room, it was a full-on think tank session. Half a dozen top engineers. Neuralink researchers. AI ethicists. Elon at the center. They weren't testing Leo. They were listening. For 3 hours, Leo walked them through his redesign of the neural interface model. He talked about sympathetic AI, an interface that didn't just read brainwaves, but emotionally interpreted them in real time to build user-specific learning models. One engineer whispered to another, is he making this up on the spot? No, the other said. He's building it on the spot. By the end of the session, Elon was visibly shaken, in the best and worst ways. That night, back at his mansion, Elon stood in front of his home terminal, staring at a headline that hadn't been published yet. He'd written it himself. A mental exercise. World's richest man replaced by 10-year-old genius, AI revolution led by a child. He deleted it. Poured a glass of whiskey. Stared out at the Pacific. His mind wandered back to the first time he'd really felt fear about AI. Not fear of machines. Fear of people, not understanding them. Not respecting what they could do. What they would do. Leo Reynolds was brilliant. He was also a liability. Not because of who he was, but because of who might come after him. If one child could redesign the foundation of Neuralink from a laptop in Nebraska, what could an organized group of minds like that accomplish? And what if someone else, another company, another country, got to them first? The next day, Elon made a call. Not to the press. Not to his board. To someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Hey. I need you to look into a name, Leo Reynolds. Age 10. Lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. We may be looking at a generational threat, or the start of something we can't control. The voice on the other end paused. Then responded, flatly. Does the kid know what he is? Not yet, Elon said. But soon, everyone else will. Back in Nebraska, Leo logged into his YouTube channel for the first time since the video went viral. He had 1.4 million new subscribers. There were messages from reporters. Professors. Recruiters. Random people from around the world calling him a savior, a cyber prophet, or, somewhat hilariously, the baby Yoda of tech. But one message stood out. No username. No profile picture. Just 4 words. You're not alone, Leo. Leo's finger hovered over the mouse. Then he clicked. A new window opened. It wasn't a video. It was code. Lines and lines of shimmering syntax, running like a waterfall. At the bottom, a blinking prompt. Would you like to continue? Leo hesitated. The blinking prompt stared back at him, quiet but urgent. Would you like to continue? It didn't feel like a normal message. The code behind it was different, layered, almost poetic in its structure. Whoever wrote it wasn't just brilliant, they were like him. No IP address. No traceable source. No metadata. Whoever sent it had buried their tracks so deeply, even the NSA would be impressed. Leo glanced around the hotel room. His parents were out on a walk with waffles. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and golden. He exhaled. Click. The screen went black for 3 seconds. Then, like a slow-loading video from the early 2000s, it came to life. A pixelated avatar faded in. Low-res. Glitched. Like it didn't belong to any modern operating system. Then a voice, digitized but oddly warm. "Hello, Leo. Don't be afraid. I've been waiting to meet you." Leo's fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. "Who are you?" he asked aloud. "Someone like you. Someone who sees the cracks in the machine, and wants to fix them." The avatar shimmered, then expanded, revealing a rotating 3D map of the brain, but not one Leo recognized from any textbook. This one pulsed with color and movement, displaying not just neural activity, but something deeper. Emotion. Intention. "This isn't standard brain mapping," Leo whispered. "Because it's not from Earth," the voice replied. Leo's brain kicked into overdrive. Was this a hoax? An ARG? A really elaborate Elon experiment? But the data was real. He could feel it. Intuitively. The way musicians know when a note is pure, or chess grandmasters sense the trap 5 moves ahead. "You're not just showing me brain data," Leo said slowly. "You're showing me consciousness simulation." "Correct. And you're one of the few people alive who can understand what that means." The map shifted again, this time showing Leo's own brain activity from a video he'd uploaded a year ago. The one where he tried to simulate dream logic. "We've been watching. Not to spy. To prepare." Leo leaned in. "Prepare for what?" "The next evolution. Elon Musk isn't your rival, Leo. He's your first test." Halfway across the country, Elon stared at the same screen. Except his wasn't just blinking. It was looping. "You're not alone, Leo. You're not alone, Leo. You're not alone." "Kill it," he barked at his cybersecurity chief. "We can't," the man said. "It's not from the web. We think it came through one of the old Mars comm relays. It's bouncing through low-orbit satellites that don't even exist on paper." Elon's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about Leo anymore. Something was moving beneath the surface, something ancient and intelligent and very, very careful. Back at the hotel, Leo's laptop screen went black again. But this time, it didn't restart. Instead, a new message flashed. "The pattern is real." Then a grid of dates and locations appeared. One stood out. Washington, D.C., April 28, 2:14 p.m. Leo checked the calendar. That was 3 days from now. He was 10 years old. But his instincts told him exactly what that meant. This is an invitation. He told his parents that night. He expected panic. Yelling. Grounding. Maybe even calls to the police. Instead, his mom sat quietly for a long time, then finally said, "Your grandfather used to talk about this. About strange patterns. Codes. A language beyond numbers. I thought it was just his PTSD from Vietnam." Carl nodded slowly. "I used to think he was paranoid. But now." Erin turned to Leo, her eyes sharp and wet. "Do you want to go?" Leo paused. Then nodded. "I have to." Meanwhile, in a shadowy corner of the Pentagon, a group of officials met under deep clearance. They weren't talking about Russia, or China, or AI. They were talking about Leo Reynolds. One woman in a dark suit pulled up the video feed of his Neuralink rant. 10 years old. Self-trained. He reverse-engineered proprietary technology from a YouTube live stream and predicted the faults in a system still in beta. That's not just brilliance. That's a breach. Another official leaned forward. What if he's not alone? The room fell silent. Leo's plane ticket arrived the next morning. No sender. No receipt. First class. Attached to it was a note, handwritten in perfect block letters. Not everyone will understand what you are. That's okay. Some truths are meant to be discovered, not explained. Aaron kissed Leo on the forehead at the airport. Carl handed him a flash drive. It's your grandfather's notes. In case something happens. Leo boarded the plane with a backpack, his Rubik's Cube, and a mind bracing for something bigger than Neuralink. Bigger than Elon. Bigger than Earth. As the plane climbed above the clouds, Leo looked out the window and whispered to himself. I think I just stepped into a story I didn't write, but I might be the one who ends it. Leo stared out the window as the plane began its descent into Washington, D.C., the sprawling city below growing larger with every passing second. His stomach churned, but not from nerves. There was something else, something electrical, crackling just beneath the surface of his thoughts. It was like stepping into a dream he couldn't remember, yet somehow knew he was meant to experience. He was 10 years old. And yet, everything about this trip felt like it belonged in a different life. He barely even registered the other passengers as the plane touched down with a soft bump, the engines whining before the craft slowed to a stop. The moment the seatbelt sign turned off, Leo stood up quickly, grabbing his bag, and strode down the aisle without a moment's hesitation. No one could stop him now. Not when the story was this big. Not when it was so much bigger than him. The airport was bustling as Leo walked through the terminal, his backpack clutched tightly to his back. He had no plan, no idea who he was supposed to meet. All he knew was that a code, a sequence, had led him here. Washington, D.C., April 28, at precisely 2:14 p.m. There was no obvious person waiting for him at the gate. No mysterious figure in a trench coat. Just regular people, rushing toward baggage claim, checking their phones. Yet, Leo's eyes scanned the crowd, his instincts pulling him toward something, someone, he hadn't even seen yet. He checked his phone for the 10th time. Nothing. The voice in his head was still there. Not everyone will understand what you are. Just as he began to lose hope, his phone buzzed. A new message. Follow the blue car. It will take you to where you need to go. The text had no sender. He looked around, heart thumping in his chest. A car, parked near the exit, caught his attention. It was a sleek, midnight blue sedan, almost blending into the shadows beneath the airport's exit canopy. The door swung open. A man in a dark suit, wearing mirrored sunglasses, gestured toward the back seat. Leo didn't hesitate. He walked towards the car and slid into the back, glancing once over his shoulder before the door closed behind him. As the car sped through the D.C. streets, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that something much larger than he'd anticipated was unfolding around him. The driver didn't speak. Leo glanced at his reflection in the tinted window. His mind raced. How did they know where he was? How did they know he was coming? His phone buzzed again. You've made it this far. Good. The next steps are up to you. Stay sharp. Things are not as they seem. The cryptic message only deepened the mystery. Leo sat back in his seat, trying to gather his thoughts. The city outside was a blur, buildings, cars, people, nothing felt solid. It was all part of the game. It didn't take long for them to reach their destination, an unassuming building, nestled on a quiet street just outside the city's main district. The car stopped. The driver didn't wait for Leo to ask any questions, he simply opened the door. Go inside, the driver instructed, his voice flat. Leo climbed out of the car, his feet landing on the cracked pavement as the door shut behind him. A tall figure was waiting at the entrance of the building, a shadow in the doorway. No words were exchanged. Just a silent, almost knowing gesture that led Leo into the depths of the building. The interior was stark, minimalistic. Clean walls, gray floors, sharp angles, and fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Leo's footsteps echoed as they moved down a long hallway, the sense of anticipation growing with each step. His heart pounded in his chest. They stopped at a door marked "Restricted." The man knocked, and a voice from within responded. "Enter." The door creaked open, revealing a spacious, high-tech control room. Screens flickered with data, maps, and algorithms Leo couldn't even begin to understand. But one thing was unmistakable: Elon Musk was there, standing near the back, staring at a wall of monitors. Leo's pulse quickened. Elon Musk turned slowly and locked eyes with him. "You've arrived," Elon said quietly. His voice was different than Leo had imagined, colder, more calculating. "Good. We've got a lot to talk about." The room fell silent as Leo stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him. Elon gestured to a chair opposite him at the center of the room, motioning for Leo to sit. "I didn't expect you to come this far," Elon admitted, his eyes still fixed on Leo. "Most would have been too scared. Too cautious." Leo sat down, facing him, unsure of how to proceed. The space between them felt charged, like the air itself was buzzing. "What do you want from me?" Leo asked bluntly, cutting through the tension. "I'm just a kid. I don't know what's going on." Elon smiled, a thin, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. He glanced at the monitors again, then turned back to Leo. "You're not just a kid, Leo. You're something much more. Something dangerous, if we're not careful." Leo felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What do you mean?" Leo asked, his voice quieter now. "Why is this happening?" Elon leaned forward, his tone shifting into something more serious. "Because you've uncovered something, Leo. Something the world isn't ready for. Your work with the brain, what you've built with your thoughts, it's not just an idea anymore. It's the key to a new kind of power." Leo sat still, his mind racing. The voice in his head had warned him that not everyone would understand what he was. But Elon Musk? A man who had changed the course of history. What did he want with him? Elon's eyes narrowed. "The forces watching you now are bigger than you can imagine," he said. "And they'll stop at nothing to use you for their own ends. The question is, will you choose to be part of it, or will you choose to fight it?" The door behind them opened suddenly, and the figure from the hallway stepped in. It was a woman, dressed in a sleek black suit. Her presence was authoritative, and Leo could feel the weight of her gaze as she looked at him. "Elon, we've received new intel. They're already here." Elon's face darkened, and he stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "It's starting. You're in this now, Leo. Whether you like it or not." Leo stood up, his heart pounding. His mind was spinning, processing everything he had just heard. Something bigger was coming. Something he couldn't avoid. Leo stood frozen, his breath catching in his throat. The woman in the black suit, who had just entered the room, stared at him with cold, calculating eyes. She wasn't like Elon. There was no warmth, no spark of curiosity. Just a look of professional detachment, as though Leo were merely a puzzle piece to be moved into place. The woman was tall, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back into a severe bun. Her posture was rigid, almost militaristic. The air in the room grew heavier as she spoke. "We need to move now," she said, her voice low and purposeful. "They've found us." Elon's expression hardened, but his eyes never left Leo. "You didn't tell him?" The question was more of a statement than an inquiry. The woman's lips pressed together into a tight line. "We didn't think it was necessary until now. But he has to understand. They're already in the city. They won't stop until they have him. Leo felt the weight of those words pressing down on him. His palms began to sweat. Who were they? And why was he the target? You didn't tell me anything, Leo said, his voice barely above a whisper, though he tried to steady it. He felt the tension building in his chest, an oppressive knot tightening as he realized the gravity of the situation. Elon turned to Leo, his face softer now, but still holding that calculating edge. We've been trying to protect you, Leo. You've been in the dark for too long. Now you need to decide if you want to be part of this, or if you want to walk away. There's no middle ground anymore. Leo felt his mind spinning. This wasn't just about coding or technology. It wasn't even about creating the next big breakthrough. It was something much bigger. Something dangerous. Elon stepped forward, his gaze intense. I know you've been approached by others. But they're not on our side. And if you don't play along, they will use you, Leo. They will break you. Leo clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He had no idea who they were. Who were these people who wanted him? Why? What had he gotten himself into? Before he could ask, the woman spoke again, her tone clipped. We don't have time for this. We have a plan, and we need to stick to it. They won't wait for us to catch up. Elon nodded, then turned to Leo with a look that was almost apologetic. You're not the only one with power. But you are the only one who can stop this. Leo's mind raced. He had never felt so out of control. The person who had always been in charge of his life, the one who set the rules, the one who solved problems, was suddenly the one who didn't know what to do. The woman in the suit reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. It was sleek and silver, almost otherworldly. She handed it to Leo without a word. Take this, she instructed. It's your key. Your protection. It's embedded with security protocols you won't understand yet, but you'll need it. Leo hesitated. His fingers brushed over the cool surface of the device, and for a split second, he felt a strange pulse of energy run through him. It was like a warning, and an invitation, all at once. He took it, carefully, as if handling a live wire. The woman gave him a sharp nod. You need to trust us, Leo. This is your only way out. Outside, the world of Washington, D.C. seemed oblivious to the storm that was gathering. Cars passed by, people walked hurriedly along the sidewalks, and life continued in its predictable rhythm. But inside the control room, nothing was ordinary. Elon, Leo, and the woman, whose name Leo still didn't know, were preparing to leave. Elon motioned for Leo to follow him as the woman exited first, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Where are we going? Leo asked, his voice quiet, but full of intent. Elon turned to him with a rare, almost reassuring smile. We're going to a safe house. A place where you can meet the others. The ones who can help you understand what's really happening. The car ride was tense, and Leo's thoughts kept swirling. Who were these people? What was the real purpose behind everything they had been telling him? And how was he, a 10-year-old boy, supposed to stop it all? The car pulled up to a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. The woman in the suit was already at the entrance, waiting for them. They entered quickly, as though the walls themselves might be listening. The safe house wasn't what Leo had expected. It was modern, yet cold, metal walls, sleek white furniture, and hidden technology everywhere. He could almost feel the hum of something unseen, like a signal transmitted on a frequency too high for his ears to detect. Elon led him down a corridor into a small, secure room at the back. There, on a screen, Leo saw something that made his stomach drop. A map. It wasn't just a map of Washington, D.C. It was a map of the entire world. And there were dots. Red, flashing dots, clustered around key locations. What is this? Leo whispered, his voice shaky. Elon's eyes darkened as he stared at the screen. This is where the other players are. They've been tracking you, Leo. Watching you for a while. And they've been waiting for you to make a move. Leo leaned in, his hands gripping the table. So, what do I do now? Elon looked at him seriously. Now, Leo, the real game begins. We need to move fast. You're the key to stopping them. But you're going to need help. And you're going to need to trust the right people. Leo's mind was reeling. The dots on the screen. The players. The game. He had just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. His life would never be the same. And yet, deep inside, something told him that maybe, just maybe, he was ready for this. The room was dim, its only illumination coming from the glowing screens around them. The buzzing of technology filled the air, almost like a quiet heartbeat of the house. Leo sat at the center, his mind still racing. He had just learned that he was part of something much bigger, something far beyond his comprehension. The weight of it all hung heavily on his shoulders. Across from him, Elon Musk was staring at the map of the world, his fingers dancing across the touchscreen, zooming in on the flashing red dots. Leo felt the chill in the room deepen as the tension thickened. These, Elon began, his voice grave, are the other players. People who have been tracking you for a while. Some of them want to use you. Others, they want to control you. Leo swallowed, trying to keep his composure. He had no idea who these people were or what they wanted from him. But it was clear, they weren't the kind of people you could simply avoid. What do they want from me? Leo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elon paused for a moment, turning to face Leo. His expression was unreadable, but there was something almost sorrowful in his eyes. Like he had seen this kind of thing before. You're more than just a prodigy, Leo. You're a key. The work you've done with your mind, with the tech you've developed, it's something people would kill to control. These people know that. And they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. Leo felt a knot form in his stomach. He had always known he was different. But this? This was something else entirely. So, what am I supposed to do? Leo's voice was tight now, the weight of the situation beginning to crush him. Elon leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Leo's. You have two choices. You can stay here, in the safety of this house, and let us protect you. Or, you can join the game. You can use your abilities to change the world. But be warned, Leo, it's not just about brains and talent anymore. You're playing a game where trust is your most valuable currency, and it's in short supply. Leo looked at the map again, his eyes drawn to the blinking red dots. Each one represented a person. A threat. His heart hammered in his chest. Who are they? Leo asked, pointing at the nearest dot in Europe. Elon followed his gaze, his fingers hovering over the screen. That one's from the Russian Federation. Someone with deep ties to intelligence agencies. They've been tracking our movements for months now. And that, he paused, his eyes darkening. That's someone who's already in the city. And they've been waiting for you. Leo blinked, feeling his skin prickle with unease. He couldn't even fathom the power these people wielded. Yet, for some reason, they were all circling around him, watching his every move. Before he could respond, the woman in the black suit, the one who had led them into the safe house, stepped into the room. Her presence was imposing, and the air seemed to crackle with the energy of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. Elon, she said sharply. It's time. We can't afford any more delays. Elon nodded, standing up abruptly. His hand hovered over the map for a moment before he turned toward Leo. This is where the puzzle starts to make sense, Leo. You can't stop this with just your mind. You'll need to play the game, outsmart them before they outsmart you. Leo stood, following Elon's lead. His pulse quickened, and his mind raced. Play the game. Outwit them. Could he even do that? How could a 10-year-old boy like him, someone who had only recently learned the full scope of his potential, face such powerful players? The woman motioned for Leo to follow her. She moved quickly, almost as if she knew exactly where she was going. Elon walked alongside him, his footsteps steady but purposeful. "You're about to meet someone who might be able to help you understand what you're up against," Elon said. "She's been in this game longer than you realize." Leo glanced up at Elon, his thoughts racing. "Who?" he asked. Elon didn't answer right away. Instead, he led Leo through a narrow hallway to a locked door at the back of the building. The woman inserted a keycard into the slot, and the door clicked open. Inside the room, a woman sat at a large desk, her eyes glued to a screen. Her hair was short, cropped close to her head, and she wore a military-style jacket, almost blending into the shadows of the room. "This is Kira," the woman in the black suit introduced. "She's our lead strategist." Kira looked up from her screen as they entered. She didn't smile. Her gaze was calculating, her eyes sharp, scanning Leo before she spoke. "So, you're the genius they've been talking about." Her voice was cool, almost bored, as though she had dealt with many prodigies before. "Let's see if you live up to the hype." Leo didn't know how to respond. He could feel the weight of her gaze as she continued to study him. The air between them felt charged. Kira was different from the others. She didn't look at him like he was just a kid. She looked at him like he was the key to winning a battle that had already begun. "You're here because Elon believes you're the one who can make a difference," Kira said, tapping something into her computer. "But here's the thing, Leo. Everyone around you is playing their own game. They've got their own motivations, their own secrets. And they're all going to be looking for ways to use you, manipulate you." Leo felt a wave of panic surge in him. Everyone wanted something from him. But no one had ever been this direct about it. "So, what do I do?" Leo asked, his voice unsteady. Kira leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "You learn how to play the game. You learn who to trust. And you start taking your own pieces off the board before they take yours." Leo's head was spinning. This was a game of shadows and secrets. A game where the players didn't just fight with technology, but with influence, manipulation, and control. And he was the prize. He didn't know if he could keep up. But one thing was certain, there was no going back now. As he stood there, his heart racing, Leo realized something. The game had already begun, and whether he liked it or not, he was a player. The next few days passed in a blur of strategy meetings, tense discussions, and endless simulations. Leo barely had time to process everything that was happening. He was learning quickly, absorbing more information than most people his age could handle in a lifetime. But the more he learned, the more the world seemed like a giant web of deception, and the more dangerous it felt. Kira's words haunted him. "You learn how to play the game. You learn who to trust." But who could he trust? The woman in the black suit, whose name he still didn't know, had been his only guide so far. Elon was a mystery. He was brilliant, but there were things about him that Leo couldn't quite understand. And Kira? She was a strategist, cold and calculating, with a mind as sharp as a blade. Then there was the woman who'd brought Leo here, the one who had initially seemed like his protector. She had always kept her distance, watching from the shadows, never fully opening up to him. She had warned him about the others, but who was she really? What side was she on? Leo sat in the corner of the safe house's strategy room, watching the others work. Elon and Kira were at the table, going over plans for the next phase of their operation. The woman in the black suit was talking to a few of the other members of their team in the back corner of the room, her voice low, her tone serious. Elon noticed Leo's distant gaze and walked over to him, sitting beside him with a quiet sigh. "You're overwhelmed," Elon said, his voice soft, almost understanding. "I get it. It's a lot to take in." Leo didn't say anything. He didn't know how to explain the churn of confusion and fear inside him. He had always been in control of his life, always the smartest one in the room, the one who could find a way out of any problem. But now, everything was a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit together. "I don't know who to trust," Leo admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Elon studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable. "The game isn't about trust, Leo," he said. "It's about survival. Sometimes, you don't have the luxury of knowing who's on your side. You just have to make the best move and hope it pays off." Leo looked up at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and frustration. He didn't want to just survive. He wanted to know the truth. He wanted to understand why all of this was happening, why people like him, people with abilities like his, were being hunted. "But I need to know who the good guys are," Leo insisted. "I don't want to be a pawn in someone else's game." Elon looked at him, his gaze softening for a moment before it hardened again. "You're right to question everything. But there's no black and white in this world anymore. Only shades of gray. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you'll be able to think clearly." Before Leo could respond, Kira walked over, her movements precise and purposeful. She stood in front of him, her expression as stoic as ever. "Elon's right. There's no room for idealism here," she said flatly. "If you're going to play, you need to stop thinking about who's good and who's bad. The rules are different now." Leo's chest tightened. Was she trying to convince him? Or was this some sort of test? "So what do I do?" Leo asked, his voice heavy with uncertainty. Kira's gaze locked onto his, unflinching. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering something. "You start by understanding that the people who want to control you will use every weakness you have against you. But the people who help you, they'll see those weaknesses and use them to make you stronger." Leo frowned, confused. "So, who's helping me?" he asked. Kira's lips curled into a thin smile. It wasn't comforting. It was dangerous. "That's for you to figure out." The days that followed were a blur of tension. Every conversation seemed like a potential trap, every interaction a delicate dance of trust and suspicion. Leo found himself drawn more and more into the puzzle that was his life. Every corner of the house, every room, seemed to have its own set of secrets. And the people inside those walls, they were no exception. One night, Leo overheard a conversation that chilled him to his core. He had been trying to sneak down the hallway to the kitchen when he heard the soft murmur of voices coming from the war room. It was Kira's voice, low and urgent. "We're running out of time. They're getting too close." The woman in the black suit answered, her voice clipped and stern. "We need Leo. He's the only one who can stop them. But we can't afford to trust anyone right now. If anyone gets close to him—" Kira interrupted her, her voice even colder than before. "You know what happens if we trust the wrong people. I'm not letting that happen again." Leo froze. Who were they talking about? And what had happened before? He tried to step away quietly, but a floorboard creaked under his foot. The voices stopped instantly. His heart pounded in his chest as he backed away from the door, his mind racing. What had he just overheard? And what did it mean for him? The next morning, the woman in the black suit came to him. Her face was impassive, but Leo could see the hint of concern in her eyes. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low. Leo followed her into a small, private room. It was dim, with only a single light overhead. The walls were bare, and there was an air of finality to the space. The woman closed the door behind them, locking it with a soft click. "What's going on?" Leo asked, his voice sharp. He wasn't sure whether he could trust her, but he needed answers. She paused for a moment, her eyes flicking to the door as if ensuring they were alone. "You overheard something last night," she said quietly. "I need you to know something. There are people on our side who are compromised." People who are working against us from within. Leo's stomach dropped. Compromised? Who? But who? Leo demanded. She looked at him, her expression hardening. I can't tell you that. Not yet. The tension in the air felt palpable, like the calm before a storm. Leo sat on the edge of the small cot in his room, his hands clasped tightly together. He couldn't shake the weight of what he had overheard. People within the safe house were compromised. People he had been relying on. People he thought were his allies. Who could he trust now? The question gnawed at him, distracting him from everything else. He had always prided himself on his ability to read people, to understand their motives, but this? This was something else entirely. He was surrounded by experts in manipulation, people who played games with lives for a living. How could he possibly navigate that kind of world? The woman in the black suit had given him a cryptic warning, and it left him with more questions than answers. Compromised allies? People working against him from within? If he couldn't even trust the ones closest to him, then how could he stay one step ahead? The knock on his door broke his train of thought. Leo? It's Elon. I need to talk to you. Elon's voice sounded calm, almost too calm, and Leo's heart raced. He had been avoiding Elon ever since the conversation with the woman in the black suit. Elon had always been a mystery to him, but now, he wasn't sure where Elon stood in all of this. Leo took a deep breath before opening the door. Elon stood there, looking every bit the part of a genius inventor and strategist. His sharp eyes, the way his hands were always moving, always planning, it was hard to ignore that there was more to him than met the eye. I don't know if I can trust anyone here, Leo blurted out, before Elon could say anything. Elon's brow furrowed slightly, but his expression remained neutral. I understand, Elon said, his voice low and steady. But you're not alone in this, Leo. I'm not here to mislead you. I'm here because I want to help you. The truth is, everyone in this game has their own agenda. Even me. Leo's stomach tightened. He had heard enough of these vague promises to last a lifetime. Why should I believe you? Leo asked, his voice sharp. How do I know you're not part of the game, too? For a moment, Elon didn't respond. He looked at Leo with a mixture of empathy and something else, something almost sad. Because I've been playing the game for too long, Elon said finally. And I've seen what it does to people. It eats them alive. It makes you question everything, even the people you care about. Leo looked at him, his heart pounding. The words felt honest, but then again, Leo had learned that honesty could be one of the most dangerous weapons in the game. You're not the only one who's been deceived, Elon continued. There are others here who have their own motives, their own secrets. But you're not in this alone. I promise you. The sincerity in Elon's voice felt real, but Leo couldn't let his guard down. Not yet. Not with everything at stake. So what do we do now? Leo asked, his voice laced with skepticism. Elon's eyes narrowed, his face hardening as if preparing for a battle. We uncover who's working against us before it's too late. We find the betrayers within our ranks, and we make sure they don't get the chance to strike. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Elon and Kira, along with the others in the safe house, began to sift through information, trying to uncover who could be compromised. But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became. Every lead, every clue seemed to take them in a circle, leading them back to the same people. The same faces. The people they had trusted. Leo's mind raced. The woman in the black suit had said the betrayers were inside, but could it really be someone within their team? Could one of them really be working against them all? It seemed impossible. But if there was one thing he had learned from all this, it was that nothing was impossible. Nothing was certain. He sat in the war room late one night, his head resting on his hands. The quiet hum of the computers and the soft murmurs of conversation in the background did little to soothe his racing thoughts. He was exhausted, mentally and physically, but the weight of the situation kept him awake, alert, constantly looking over his shoulder. "You're thinking too much," Kira's voice cut through the silence. Leo looked up. Kira was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She had been one of the few people who didn't try to coddle him or treat him like a child. She was blunt, to the point, and Leo respected that, most of the time. "I'm trying to figure out who's betraying us," Leo said, his voice strained. "But I keep hitting dead ends. It doesn't make sense." Kira stepped into the room and sat down beside him. She was quiet for a moment, staring at the map on the wall, before turning her gaze back to him. "It's not supposed to make sense," she said finally. "If it made sense, it wouldn't be a game. You need to stop trying to predict everything. Sometimes, you just have to let things play out." Leo looked at her, his brow furrowed. "So what do we do? Wait for the next move? Let them make the first strike?" Kira's lips curled into a small smile, though it was anything but reassuring. "You're already making the first move, Leo," she said, her voice low. "The game's already started. You just don't know it yet." Suddenly, the door opened, and the woman in the black suit stepped inside. Her eyes swept over the room before landing on Leo. "We have a problem," she said, her voice sharp. "One of you has been compromised." Leo's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The moment he had feared had come. "Who?" Leo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman in the black suit took a deep breath, and for the first time, Leo saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "It's someone you wouldn't expect." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Leo's pulse quickened, his mind racing. The woman in the black suit had just dropped a bombshell. One of them was a traitor. The trust he had built with the team now felt fragile, like a house of cards on the verge of collapsing. "Who?" Leo's voice barely broke the silence, his throat dry. The woman's eyes flicked from Leo to Kira and Elon. For a brief moment, she seemed to hesitate, as if choosing her words carefully. Then, she spoke again, her voice steady but with an edge of something Leo couldn't place. "It's not just one person. It's more than that. But there's a specific individual who's been working with the enemy." Leo's stomach twisted into knots. He had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made everything real. The safe house, the people he thought he could rely on, was it all a lie? Kira stood up abruptly, her sharp gaze flicking toward the woman in the black suit. "Who's the first target?" she demanded, her voice cool but dangerous. The woman in the black suit took a deep breath before responding. "I'll tell you, but we have to act quickly. We don't have much time." Elon, who had been unusually quiet until now, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "I'm guessing you already know who it is." The woman met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "I have my suspicions, but this time, we have proof." Elon's lips curled into a tight smile, as if he had been expecting this moment. But Leo didn't share his confidence. This wasn't a game anymore. They were dealing with lives, his life, his future. And the future of the people around him. "Let's get to it," Kira said, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "We don't have time for games." The woman nodded, then turned to Leo. There was a fleeting moment of something, concern. Guilt. But it was gone before Leo could fully decipher it. "Follow me," she instructed, her voice cold, businesslike. Leo glanced at Kira and Elon, who both nodded grimly. It was clear that they had been expecting this. This was part of the plan. But Leo? He felt more unprepared than ever. They moved swiftly through the hallways of the safe house, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. Leo's mind spun as they passed rooms he had grown familiar with, rooms that had once felt like his sanctuary. Now, everything felt like a potential trap. They arrived at a nondescript door at the far end of the hall, which the woman in the black suit opened without hesitation. Inside was a small, dimly lit room. The air was thick with anticipation, and Leo could almost taste the tension. "Who's inside?" Leo asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "A traitor," the woman replied bluntly. She stepped into the room first, followed by Kira and Elon. Leo hesitated for a moment, then followed them inside. The figure sitting in the middle of the room was none other than Finn, the man who had helped Leo get to the safe house in the first place. Finn had been the one to reach out to him when things started going south, the one who had offered him a sense of safety when Leo had nowhere else to turn. Leo had trusted him. But now, as Finn looked up from the chair, his face ashen and tense, Leo saw something that made his blood run cold: guilt. And something else. Something darker. "What's going on here, Finn?" Leo's voice was shaky, but he couldn't help it. He had to know the truth. Finn didn't meet his gaze immediately. Instead, he looked at the floor, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The silence was unbearable. "I didn't want it to happen like this," Finn said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "But they have my family." A chill ran down Leo's spine. The words hit him like a punch. "They have my family." Leo could only imagine the kind of pressure Finn must have been under. The enemy didn't play fair. They used leverage, they used fear. Kira took a step forward, her eyes hard. "You've been working for them all along, haven't you?" she said, her voice low but filled with venom. "You've been feeding us information." Finn's face twisted in a grimace, and he nodded slowly. The weight of his admission hung in the air like a storm cloud. "I never wanted to hurt any of you," he said, his voice breaking. "But they've got my sister. They'll kill her if I don't comply. I had no choice. I had to do what they asked." Leo felt a knot form in his throat. He wanted to scream, to shout at Finn for betraying them, for betraying him. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the desperation in Finn's voice, or maybe it was the fact that Leo himself had never been in that position, the position of having something, or someone, held over his head. Finn's eyes locked onto Leo's, filled with pain and regret. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." Leo's heart pounded in his chest. Everything about this situation felt wrong. Finn had been the one person Leo thought he could trust, the one person who seemed like he genuinely wanted to help. And yet, here they were. Betrayal. Lies. Deception. But Leo knew what he had to do. He couldn't let this slide. If they let one person betray them, others would follow. The entire mission, the entire operation, would be compromised. They had to act now. They had to make an example of Finn. "What happens now?" Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman in the black suit stepped forward, her expression cold and decisive. "We do what needs to be done," she said. "And we move forward. There's no room for weakness in this game." Leo nodded slowly, his mind already shifting gears. The betrayal hurt, yes. But there was no time for pity. They had a mission to complete. And he had a responsibility to ensure it succeeded. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The room felt colder now. After the unmasking of Finn as a traitor, the atmosphere in the safe house had shifted, like the calm before a hurricane. Leo couldn't shake the heaviness in his chest, the nagging feeling that he was standing on the edge of something he didn't fully understand. The betrayal had shaken him to his core, but what was worse was the sense of guilt that was starting to creep in. Had he missed the signs? Should he have seen it coming? Finn had been a friend, a confidant. Leo had trusted him. But now, all of that seemed like a distant memory. "We did what we had to do," Kira said, her voice breaking through the silence. She was standing by the window, her gaze distant, almost lost. "Finn made his choice, Leo. And you made yours. Leo nodded slowly, but the weight of those words didn't make him feel any better. Finn hadn't wanted to hurt them, but his actions had done just that. And now, the team was left picking up the pieces. Elon entered the room, his face set in a grim expression. The usual spark in his eyes had been replaced with something colder, more calculated. Leo could see the wheels turning in Elon's mind, but there was something different about the way he looked at him. The trust they once had seemed to be fading, as if every new revelation made it harder for Elon to see Leo as the leader he had once believed in. "We need to focus on the next steps," Elon said, his tone flat. "We can't let this stall us. The mission is still in play." Leo didn't respond right away. He could feel the cracks in their unity, the fissures that had started to form when they first uncovered the truth about the traitors in their midst. But he couldn't afford to dwell on it. He had to think about what came next, what was still left to salvage. "Right," Leo said finally, standing up and pacing the room. "But how do we move forward when we can't trust anyone? How do we keep going when everything we've worked for is falling apart?" Kira shot him a pointed look. "We move forward because we have no other choice. You can't let the past paralyze you, Leo. The only way out is through." Leo stopped pacing, his eyes meeting hers. There was something in her words that resonated deeply. He had been consumed by what had already happened, the betrayal, the loss of trust, but Kira was right. They had to keep pushing forward. There was no room for hesitation. "What's the next move?" Leo asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Elon glanced at Kira, and then at the woman in the black suit, who had entered the room silently, as always. The quiet hum of the tension in the room was almost tangible. "We go after the core," the woman said, her voice low but firm. "We go after their leadership. Take out the people pulling the strings, and the rest will fall apart." Leo's mind raced. The core. The people behind everything. They had been working under the assumption that the enemy was faceless, a shadowy organization with no real leaders. But now, they were being told to target the heart of the operation. Was that the right move? It was a dangerous gamble. If they were wrong, it could mean the end of everything. "And how do we find them?" Leo asked, his voice tense. The woman's lips curled into something that might have been a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We have the intel," she said, pulling out a small device from her jacket. It hummed to life as she plugged it into a nearby screen. "The network is already in place. We've identified key targets, people who can lead us to the leaders. But there's one catch." Leo narrowed his eyes, the unease creeping back. "What's the catch?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking between him and the others. Then she exhaled, clearly weighing her words. "One of the targets is, someone you know," she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic. Leo felt his stomach lurch. "Someone I know?" "Who?" he demanded, though he wasn't sure if he wanted to know the answer. The woman looked at the screen, where an image of a man flickered to life. Leo's heart stopped. "David," she said, her voice heavy. "David." Leo's mind went blank for a moment. David was the one person he had trusted completely from the very beginning. They had worked together in the early stages of the mission. They had shared everything, from plans to personal stories. They had fought side by side, risking their lives. But now? Now David was on the list of targets. He was tied to the enemy. Leo could feel the blood drain from his face. How could this be happening? How could David, someone he had called a friend, be involved in this? "This is a mistake," Leo said, his voice breaking. "It has to be." Elon's voice was low and steady, but there was an edge to it that Leo had never heard before. "We all have secrets, Leo. Some are bigger than others. But we can't afford to make excuses for people. Not anymore." Kira stepped closer to Leo, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of sympathy and cold resolve. The truth is ugly, Leo. But it's real. And we have to deal with it. David is in this deep. We have to make a choice. Leo's mind raced as the weight of the situation settled over him. David had been a trusted ally. A friend. How could he be a part of the very thing they were fighting against? How could Leo have been so blind? But the truth was undeniable. David's face on the screen, his expression cold and calculating, was all the confirmation Leo needed. He wasn't just another victim of circumstance. He was a willing participant. We go after him, Leo said finally, his voice firm. We finish this. The woman in the black suit gave him a nod of approval, but Leo didn't feel the satisfaction of victory. There was no triumph here, only the crushing weight of reality. Betrayal, loss, and the knowledge that they were entering even more dangerous territory. As the group moved to finalize their plans, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing right into the enemy's hands. But what choice did they have? They had come too far to stop now. Leo's heart pounded in his chest as the team prepared for the confrontation. The plan had been set. They had the intel. They knew where David would be. The trap was laid, but Leo couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was off. The man who had once been his closest ally, his friend, was now an enemy. In the back of his mind, Leo couldn't help but wonder what had changed. What had driven David to the other side? They had been through so much together, and yet now, Leo found himself on the brink of facing the very person he thought he could trust with his life. The betrayal stung more than he ever imagined it could. Kira stood beside him, her gaze hard, her eyes scanning the surroundings with precision. She wasn't one to show vulnerability, but Leo could see the storm brewing behind her calm exterior. She had her own reasons for hating betrayal. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice quiet but purposeful. Leo nodded slowly. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready for this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it has to be done." They were outside a warehouse, dark, cold, and eerily quiet. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver glow over the grim scene. The only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. Leo's fingers tightened around the weapon in his hand, though he wasn't sure what he was prepared for. The final confrontation had arrived, and there was no turning back. Elon stood at the rear of the group, his face set in stone, his hands resting at his sides as if waiting for the inevitable. The woman in the black suit, the mysterious figure who had helped guide them thus far, was silent, her gaze locked on the warehouse entrance. "This is it," she said, her voice low but firm. "Once we go in, there's no coming back. Make sure you're ready for anything." Leo took a deep breath. It was impossible to ignore the weight of her words. This wasn't just another mission, it was personal. David was more than a target now. He was a part of Leo's past, a reminder of everything he had lost. The trust, the camaraderie, the shared memories, they were all shattered in an instant. "Let's move," Kira said, taking the lead. She didn't need to say more. Her actions spoke louder than words ever could. With that, they advanced toward the warehouse, moving quickly and silently, as if the shadows themselves were conspiring with them. They reached the entrance without incident, and Kira gave a quick hand signal to halt. The woman in the black suit stepped forward, pulling out a small device that pinged with a soft, steady beep. The lights inside the warehouse flickered on and off, casting eerie shadows across the room. "David's inside," she said, her eyes narrowing. "But be prepared for anything. He won't be alone." Leo nodded, his body tense, his mind focused. The time for second-guessing had passed. They had come too far to stop now. Kira pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. Leo followed closely behind, his heart thudding in his chest with every step. They moved like ghosts, slipping through the dark corridors of the warehouse, the smell of dust and oil thick in the air. The space was vast, and the sound of their footsteps echoed ominously in the silence. Then, suddenly, there he was. David stood in the center of the warehouse, bathed in a harsh spotlight. His eyes locked onto Leo's, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. It was as if time itself had frozen. There was no recognition in David's gaze, only a cold, calculating look. This wasn't the man Leo had known. This wasn't the friend who had once shared his dreams, his fears. David's face was expressionless, his posture rigid, but there was something in the air, a tension that Leo couldn't shake. The betrayal was tangible, like a weight in the room. "I knew you'd come," David said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Leo didn't speak immediately. What could he say? What could anyone say in this moment? The man standing before him had been his closest ally, and now, he was the enemy. "Why, David?" Leo finally asked, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "What happened? We were on the same side. We were supposed to be a team." David's eyes flickered for a moment, but then he looked away, his jaw tightening. He seemed to be weighing something in his mind. "You were always too idealistic, Leo," David replied, his voice taking on a harder edge. "You thought we could change the world, fix everything. But that's not how it works. Sometimes, you have to do things you don't want to in order to survive. I did what I had to do." Leo shook his head, his chest tight with emotion. "You betrayed us. You betrayed me. We could have made it through this together. We didn't need to cross this line." David's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You're naive, Leo. You've always been. They offered me a way out, a chance to end this nightmare. I took it. You should have done the same." The words hit Leo like a punch to the gut. They offered him a way out. That was what this had been about all along. David hadn't just fallen to the enemy, he had chosen them. He had chosen self-preservation over loyalty, over everything they had fought for. The room seemed to close in around Leo. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. It was all coming to a head, and there was no going back. Kira stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Enough talk, David," she said, her tone hard and final. "We don't have time for this. We're here to end it." For the first time, something flickered in David's eyes, fear. But it was quickly replaced by something darker. He reached for a weapon at his side, and Leo's heart leapt into his throat. It was happening. The final battle. The price of betrayal was about to be paid. The room exploded into chaos. David's hand was already reaching for his weapon before Leo could react. Time seemed to slow as Leo's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, he dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the burst of gunfire that tore through the air. The shot missed by inches, but the force of it echoed in the cavernous warehouse, sending a shockwave through Leo's body. "Get down!" Kira shouted, pulling Leo behind a steel pillar for cover. Leo's heart was pounding. His pulse throbbed in his ears as he pressed himself against the cold metal. The sound of footsteps echoed across the floor as David's men began to move, taking up positions in the shadows. It was clear that this wasn't just a confrontation with David, it was a battle for survival. Elon, ever the strategist, was already moving, his mind working faster than anyone could keep up. He gestured for Kira to flank the left, while he and the woman in the black suit moved toward the right. The plan was clear: divide and conquer, take out David's men, and then face David himself. But Leo's focus was solely on David. The man who had once been a brother to him now stood as a figure of cold betrayal. It was almost surreal to see him in the center of all this, the same person who had fought beside Leo in countless battles, now pointing a weapon at him. "This is your fault, Leo," David's voice rang out, low and dangerous. "You never understood. You were always too weak. And now, here we are." Leo gritted his teeth. The words stung, but he couldn't let them distract him. He couldn't afford to let anger cloud his judgment. He had to think. Had to act. "You're wrong, David," Leo called back, keeping his voice steady. "I've always understood. I understood loyalty, friendship. But you've lost sight of everything we stood for." A flash of emotion flickered across David's face, anger, perhaps a trace of regret, but it was gone before Leo could make sense of it. The tension in the air was palpable, each of them waiting for the other to make the first move. Then, without warning, the gunfire erupted again. David's men had opened fire, and the sound of bullets slicing through the air filled the space, sending everyone scrambling for cover. "Take them down!" Elon shouted, his voice filled with determination. Kira moved like lightning, darting from cover to cover, her weapon steady as she took out one of David's men with precision. Elon followed suit, his shots sharp and calculated, each one landing true. Leo's mind raced. He could hear the sound of the gunfire, the footsteps of their enemies moving swiftly in the shadows. But through it all, his eyes never left David. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a reckoning. Leo needed to face David, to make him understand the cost of his betrayal. With a surge of adrenaline, Leo moved. He darted across the open floor, dodging gunfire, his body reacting faster than his mind. The warehouse was a maze of steel and shadows, but Leo knew he had to get to David. If he didn't, this would never end. As he closed the distance between them, he heard David's voice again, this time tinged with desperation. "Leo, don't do this. You don't understand." David yelled. But Leo did understand. He understood that David had made his choice. He understood that no matter how much they had shared in the past, it didn't matter now. What mattered was the future, the world they were fighting for, and the people who would stand with him, not against him. Leo reached David in a blur of motion, tackling him to the ground. The two men struggled, each fighting for control. David's eyes were wild, his grip on the gun slipping as Leo disarmed him, throwing the weapon aside. They rolled across the cold concrete floor, their bodies tangled in a brutal contest of wills. Leo's breath came in sharp gasps as he landed a punch to David's jaw, knocking him backward. But David didn't stay down. He scrambled to his feet, his face twisted in anger. "You think you can stop me?" David spat, wiping blood from his lip. "You're just like them. You'll never win." Leo's fist clenched, his knuckles white. This wasn't just a battle of strength. It was a battle of ideology, a clash of everything they had once believed in. Leo knew that to stop David, he had to stop the lies that had been planted in his mind, the lies that had twisted everything they had fought for. "You've already lost, David," Leo said, his voice cold. "You just don't see it yet." David hesitated, his eyes narrowing. For a fleeting moment, Leo thought he saw doubt in his old friend's gaze. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same cold, hard resolve. Before Leo could react, David lunged at him, grabbing him by the throat. The pressure on Leo's windpipe was suffocating, but he fought back, his hands grasping David's wrists, trying to break free. But then, just as quickly as the attack had begun, it ended. David was thrown off, his body slamming into the wall with a sickening thud. Elon had appeared out of nowhere, his weapon still in hand, his expression grim. "You're done, David," Elon said, his voice unwavering. David glared at him, his chest heaving with rage. But there was nothing left in his eyes. The fight had gone out of him. He knew he was beaten. Kira stepped forward, her weapon aimed at David's head. "It's over," she said softly. David's gaze shifted to Leo, his eyes full of something that might have been regret. But then he just shook his head, as if accepting the inevitability of what had come. "You're right," David said, his voice quiet. "I lost." And with that, it was over. The warehouse was eerily silent now, the echoes of gunfire and screams fading into the darkness. Leo stood in the center of the room, his chest heaving as he wiped the sweat from his brow. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. David was defeated, but at what cost? The team gathered around, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. Kira, still breathing heavily, lowered her weapon, her eyes scanning the room, wary of any remaining threats. Elon stood beside her, his hands clenched into fists, the tension in his jaw betraying the storm raging inside him. The woman in the black suit, who had been the most composed throughout the battle, was now visibly shaken, her gaze distant as she processed the outcome of the mission. For a brief moment, no one spoke. There was nothing to say. The finality of the confrontation, the emotional toll of it all, hung heavy in the air. Leo looked over at David, who lay motionless on the ground. He had been an enemy, yes, but once, he had been a friend. They had shared so much, dreams, fears, victories. And now, David was just another casualty of war, a reminder of the price of betrayal. Is he? Kira asked softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a note of sadness that she couldn't hide. Leo glanced at David, his heart tightening. He's alive, Leo replied, his voice distant. But he's done. The fight's over for him. The words felt strange to say, as if some part of Leo was still trying to come to terms with the fact that David, the man he had trusted more than anyone, was no longer part of his world. The betrayal still stung, but Leo knew there was no turning back. We did what had to be done, Elon said, his voice low. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Kira nodded. We can't ignore the cost of all this. David was our friend. This isn't just about winning a battle, it's about the lives we've ruined along the way. The woman in the black suit stepped forward, her eyes cold but contemplative. We all knew the price when we started this. No one gets to walk away clean. Not in this world. Leo turned to face her, his gaze hard. And what now? What happens to us? The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to Leo. This is the next step. It's not over. David was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Leo stared at the envelope for a moment, a sense of dread washing over him. How much worse can it get? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You're about to find out, the woman replied. Kira stepped closer to Leo, her eyes narrowing as she glanced between him and the envelope. What's this? It's from someone who's been watching, the woman explained. Someone even more dangerous than David ever was. Leo opened the envelope with a sense of foreboding, pulling out a single sheet of paper. As he scanned the contents, his heart sank. It was a message, a direct threat, and a warning of something far more ominous lurking just beyond their reach. There's always a bigger fish, Kira muttered under her breath, her tone grim. Leo nodded, the reality of their situation hitting him hard. This victory, hard-earned as it was, meant nothing if they couldn't stop what was coming. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. We don't have time to mourn, Elon said, his voice clipped. We need to focus. There's a new threat out there. And if we don't act, everything we've done will have been for nothing. Leo looked at each of his team members, his resolve hardening. He had seen the toll this mission had taken on them all, the exhaustion, the pain, the sacrifices. But there was no time for reflection. There was no time to heal. They had to keep moving forward. We're not done, Leo said, his voice steady. We fight. And we win. That's the only way. The woman in the black suit gave him a nod, as if acknowledging the weight of his words. You're right. But be prepared for what's coming. This won't be easy. You're all in this together, for better or worse. Kira met Leo's eyes, her gaze unwavering. We've come this far. We can't stop now. Leo nodded, his mind already racing with the possibilities, the dangers that awaited them. The price of victory was steep, and they had paid dearly for it. But they couldn't afford to lose focus now. The fight was far from over. They moved quickly, gathering their gear and preparing for whatever lay ahead. There was no time for rest, no time for reflection. Not when the stakes were this high. Leo's thoughts flickered back to David for a brief moment, the man he had once called a friend. But he pushed the thoughts away. There was no place for sentimentality in this world. David had made his choice, and so had Leo. As they made their way out of the warehouse, Leo's eyes lingered on the horizon, his thoughts shifting to the next battle, the next fight. There was no going back. The path ahead was dark, dangerous, and uncertain. But Leo knew one thing for sure, he would fight to the end. No matter the cost. The weight of the past few days bore down on Leo like a crushing wave, but there was no time to let it drown him. His team was in motion, their nerves frayed but their resolve steely. The message had been clear, the victory over David meant nothing if they couldn't face what was coming next. Leo glanced over at Kira as she checked her gear. Her expression was tight, determined, but he saw the flicker of exhaustion in her eyes. They'd all been through so much, yet none of it seemed to matter anymore. The battle for survival wasn't over. Elon walked beside them, scanning the surroundings with his usual intensity, a sharp edge to his movements. The woman in the black suit had already slipped into the shadows, disappearing as quickly and quietly as she had appeared, as if she were a ghost in the night. They were all operating under the assumption that they were walking into the unknown. And yet, Leo felt an unsettling certainty in the pit of his stomach, the new enemy was already watching them. The envelope had only been the first clue, but now, the atmosphere had shifted. It felt like the calm before the storm. So who's the mystery man behind all of this? Kira asked, breaking the silence. Who's the real threat? Elon didn't answer immediately. He just kept his eyes on the horizon, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. I don't know, he admitted after a pause. But whoever they are, they're connected to something bigger than we've ever dealt with. The words hung in the air like a dark omen. Suddenly, Leo's phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the tension. He pulled it out, his eyes scanning the screen. It was an anonymous message, a simple text with a set of coordinates and a cryptic warning. You're not alone in this war. They're coming for you. It sent a chill down Leo's spine. The message was short, but its meaning was unmistakable. Whoever was behind this knew everything. They knew about Leo, about Kira, Elon, and even the woman in the black suit. They knew their every move. And they were coming for them. We need to move, Leo said, his voice tight with urgency. He stuffed the phone back into his pocket. Now. Kira didn't hesitate. Right behind you. As they headed toward the coordinates, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The quiet streets around them felt far too still, the air thick with something they couldn't name. Every footstep echoed in the silence like a drumbeat signaling something bad approaching. Leo tried to push the feeling aside, focusing instead on the mission at hand. But he couldn't ignore it. It was like a shadow looming over them, one that would strike when they least expected it. They reached a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much to look at, a decaying office complex, its windows dark and its doors rusted shut. But the coordinates on Leo's phone led them here. The place seemed deserted, but Leo knew better than to assume that meant safety. He nodded toward Elon, who quickly moved to the door and checked the locks. It's open, Elon said, his voice low. He pushed the door slightly, testing its weight. This is it. They entered, moving in tight formation. The building smelled of dust and decay, the air heavy with a stale, musty scent. Leo's senses were on high alert as they navigated through the dimly lit halls. The silence was unnerving, like something, or someone, was waiting for them. At the end of a narrow corridor, they found a door that was slightly ajar. Leo's instincts told him to be cautious, but they had no time for hesitation. They needed answers. Leo pushed the door open slowly, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A man sat in the center of the room, his back to them, bathed in the glow of a single overhead light. His figure was tall, lean, and dressed in black, blending into the shadows like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The air around him seemed to hum with danger. But it wasn't the man himself that startled Leo, it was the two figures standing beside him. One was a woman, her features obscured by a sleek black mask. Her posture was rigid, her presence commanding. The other was a young boy, no older than 10, with strikingly intelligent eyes that shone with an eerie intensity. The boy's gaze locked onto Leo's, as if he had known him for a lifetime. "We've been waiting for you," the man's voice was smooth, unsettling, and calm. Leo's grip tightened on his weapon. The tension in the room was suffocating, and he could feel the weight of the moment settling on him like a heavy cloak. "Who are you?" Leo asked, his voice steady despite the unease twisting in his gut. The man turned, revealing his face for the first time. It was a face Leo had never seen before, yet there was something hauntingly familiar about it. The man's eyes were cold, calculating, but there was a subtle glimmer of recognition in them. He knew Leo. "My name is Victor," the man said, his smile thin and predatory. "And this is my associate." He motioned to the boy. Leo's heart skipped a beat as the boy stepped forward, his small form exuding a maturity far beyond his years. The boy's eyes, sharp, calculating, and oddly detached, locked onto Leo's again, sending an icy shiver down his spine. "We've been watching," the boy said, his voice unnervingly calm. "You're not the only ones who can play this game." Kira stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Who are you really? What do you want?" Victor's smile deepened. "What I want? Simple. I want what's mine." Leo took a step forward, his voice low but firm. "And what exactly is that?" Victor's eyes darkened. "Everything. You've already taken too much. Now it's my turn to take it back." The room seemed to close in around them, the tension so thick it was nearly suffocating. Leo's mind raced, trying to process the situation. Victor and the boy were not just enemies, they were part of something much larger, something that had been pulling strings behind the scenes all along. And if they didn't stop them now, Leo knew that the war they had fought so hard to survive would be nothing compared to the storm that was about to break. The room was cold, but the tension was even colder. Leo could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as Victor and the boy watched them with unnerving calm. Everything about this moment screamed danger, and Leo knew instinctively that they were not dealing with ordinary adversaries. The woman in the black mask, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward, her movements deliberate and smooth. "We don't need to waste time," she said in a voice as sharp as a knife. "Victor doesn't play games. You're here because we want you to be." Leo glanced at Kira and Elon. They were all on edge, weapons ready but minds racing. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on them, and every instinct told him that this encounter was more than just a fight, it was a turning point in the battle they had been caught in. "What do you want from us?" Kira's voice rang out, cutting through the silence. Victor's smile never faltered. "What I want is simple," he said. "Control. The same thing everyone wants, really. But you've been getting in my way. I've let you have your fun, but now it's time for that to end." Leo stepped forward, trying to steady his nerves. "You're not the only one who's been playing the game," he said. "We've made it this far, and we're not backing down now." Victor's eyes glimmered with amusement, but the boy beside him, his small hands folded neatly in front of him, stared at Leo with an intensity that made him feel like he was being dissected. "You think you're the only ones with a plan?" Victor's voice was low, almost mocking. "There's a reason you're here, Leo. And it's not because you're special. You're a pawn, just like everyone else." The words hit Leo like a punch to the gut. The last few months, the countless battles, the sacrifices, they had all been building to this moment. Was he just another pawn in a much larger game? Was everything they had fought for just a means to an end for someone else? Before Leo could respond, the boy spoke again, his voice eerily calm for someone so young. "I've seen your future," he said, his words cutting through the air like a blade. And it's not what you think. Leo's pulse quickened. What do you mean? The boy's lips curled into a small, unsettling smile. You've been chasing the wrong enemy. You've been chasing shadows. But the truth is far worse than you can imagine. There was a shift in the atmosphere, a coldness that seeped into Leo's bones. The boy's gaze was locked onto him, and Leo could almost feel the weight of his thoughts pressing against his mind, as if the child had some kind of power he couldn't comprehend. Kira, sensing the tension, moved slightly in front of Leo, her hand hovering near her weapon. What do you want from us, really? She demanded, her voice steely. Victor stepped closer, his shadow looming over them. I want control of everything, he said, his voice a whisper now. And I'll use whatever it takes to get it. Elon, who had been studying the situation with a sharp, analytical eye, spoke up. This isn't just about power, is it? He said, his voice cutting through the charged silence. You're trying to manipulate the whole system. You want to reshape everything. Victor's gaze flicked to Elon, then back to Leo. It's not about reshaping the system. It's about owning it. You think you've been fighting for freedom, for control of your own destiny. But the truth is, you've never had control at all. You've been manipulated from the very start. And now, I'm taking it all back. Leo's mind was reeling. Was it possible? Had everything they had fought for, everything they had risked, all been for nothing? The weight of the realization was suffocating, but Leo couldn't afford to let it break him. You're wrong, Leo said, his voice firm despite the doubt swirling in his mind. We fight for freedom, for justice. We won't let you control us. Victor's eyes narrowed, his smile turning into something much darker. That's the difference between you and me, Leo. You fight for a cause, but I fight for control. And that makes all the difference. Suddenly, the room seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. The boy stepped forward, his small form impossibly still, and his eyes flashed with a strange intensity. Leo could feel the air shift again, like a gust of wind in a storm, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. And then, as quickly as it had started, the tension snapped. The boy raised a hand, and before Leo could react, the entire room seemed to shift. A wave of force, so powerful it was almost tangible, slammed into him and his team, sending them sprawling across the room. The air crackled with a strange energy, and Leo's head spun from the sudden shock. What the hell was that? Kira shouted, pushing herself off the floor and looking around in alarm. Elon scrambled to his feet, his face pale. That was no ordinary attack, he muttered. That was something else. Victor's voice cut through the chaos. You're not just fighting me. You're fighting an entire system, one that's been in place for far longer than you can imagine. And now, you're going to lose. The boy took a step forward, his presence almost overwhelming. The game is over. It's time to face the consequences. Leo's heart was racing. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a battle for control of everything they knew. And if they didn't find a way to fight back, they would lose it all. But Leo wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. He clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. They had been through too much to back down now. Whatever Victor and his mysterious ally had in store, Leo and his team would face it head-on. We're not done, Leo said through gritted teeth. Not by a long shot. The boy smiled again, but this time it was more than just unsettling, it was terrifying. We'll see about that. The sound of heavy breathing filled the room, and Leo's eyes darted around as his pulse raced. The attack from the boy had knocked them off balance, but they were still standing, barely. The room, dimly lit by a flickering overhead light, felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Kira was the first to recover. She stood up quickly, her eyes scanning the room for any further signs of danger. But there was no immediate threat, at least, not in the traditional sense. The boy had used some kind of psychic force against them, a power unlike anything Leo had ever encountered. And Victor? He watched from the shadows, a cold smile playing at the edges of his lips as if everything was going according to plan. "We need to move, now," Kira said, her voice urgent but steady. "Whatever he did to us, we're not ready for a fight like that." Elon, still crouched low, nodded. "Agreed. That boy, he's not just dangerous. He's a game changer. If he can manipulate the environment like that, we're in for a world of hurt." Leo looked at his team, but the uncertainty in their eyes was hard to ignore. They had fought countless battles, but this felt different. Victor's words had struck a chord deep inside him. Was everything they had been fighting for just a game? And if so, who was truly pulling the strings? But they couldn't afford to waste time on doubt. Not now. They had to keep moving forward. They had to fight back. "We don't have the luxury of running," Leo said, his voice strong. "If we give them any more space, they win. We push forward, no matter what." Victor's laugh echoed in the stillness, low and mocking. "Push forward? You really think you have control in this situation? The sooner you realize the truth, the sooner you'll understand that this battle is already lost." Leo's teeth clenched. "We're not losing, Victor. Not yet." A shift in the atmosphere made Leo freeze. He wasn't sure what it was, maybe it was the way Victor spoke, or the fact that the boy's gaze never wavered, but something felt off. And then, the words that came next only confirmed his worst fears. "It's already too late," Victor said, his voice ice cold. "The alliance that brought you this far. It's broken. You're on your own now." Elon's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, broken? We're not working with you." Victor smiled again, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reassured you. It was the smile of someone who knew the game was over before it even started. "You really don't get it, do you?" he said, almost pityingly. "Your alliance was never what you thought it was. You were all pawns in someone else's game." The words stung, and Leo could feel the room spinning as they landed. He tried to maintain focus, but the weight of them gnawed at him. The boy, who had been silently observing, suddenly stepped forward, his small hand held up as if commanding the room. A strange, almost suffocating energy filled the space. Leo's instincts screamed at him to fight it off, but there was something overpowering in the air. The boy's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "You think this is about control? It's not. This is about breaking you, about breaking everything you thought you knew." Kira stepped up beside Leo, her eyes hardening. "We're not broken, not yet," she spat. "Whatever you're trying to do here, we won't let you." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Oh, you'll let me. You already have." Before anyone could react, the room seemed to darken, and the boy's power grew even stronger. Leo felt the weight of the air pressing down on him, a crushing force that seemed to drain the very energy from his body. Every step felt heavier, every breath harder to take. Kira stumbled, and Elon reached out to steady her. "We need to fight back," Elon muttered. "We can't let him win." But Leo could see that this wasn't just a physical battle. This was psychological warfare. Victor was playing with their minds, turning them against each other, pulling the strings of doubt. "You still don't see it," Victor said, his voice smooth and calculating. "You think you're fighting for something greater. But all you've been doing is fighting to survive. And now you're fighting for nothing." Leo's stomach twisted. He could feel the weight of those words, a truth too painful to accept. But he couldn't let them consume him. "Not now." "That's where you're wrong," Leo said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "We're not fighting for survival. We're fighting for something more. We're fighting for the future." Victor's eyes gleamed with a strange, knowing satisfaction. "The future," he scoffed. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. The future belongs to the ones who have the power to shape it." And right now, that's not you. The room grew colder, darker, and the tension in the air became almost unbearable. Leo could feel the energy draining from him, his thoughts becoming muddled as the boy's power seemed to grow stronger by the second. He was losing his grip, and if he didn't act fast, they would all be consumed by this overwhelming force. Elon, Kira, get ready. Leo shouted, his voice laced with urgency. But before they could make a move, something unexpected happened. The door behind them slammed open with a deafening crash, and a new figure entered the room, causing a shift in the energy. The figure was tall and imposing, cloaked in shadows, but Leo could make out the glint of a weapon in their hand. Enough, the figure's voice boomed. This ends now. Victor's face twisted into a snarl. Who the hell are you? The figure stepped forward, revealing their face for the first time. It was someone Leo had never expected to see again. Someone he thought was long gone. You've made a mistake, the figure said, their voice cold but firm. And now, I'm here to fix it. Leo's heart stopped in his chest as recognition hit him like a freight train. The figure standing before them was none other than Jordan, the ally they had lost along the way. Leo's heart raced as he stared at the figure standing before them. The air in the room felt charged, electric with disbelief. It was impossible. It couldn't be, but there was no mistaking the face that had once been a symbol of hope, now standing amidst the chaos. Jordan. Leo whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. The figure nodded, the shadows that cloaked them fading slightly as they stepped into the light. It was the same Jordan, tall, with a sharp jawline and the same intense eyes that Leo had seen before, years ago, when their paths had diverged. But there was something different now. Something colder. The warmth Leo had once associated with Jordan had been replaced by an unreadable, calculating expression. Jordan's voice was calm, yet firm, as they surveyed the room. It's been a long time, hasn't it, Leo? Elon stepped forward, his face hardening as he studied the unexpected visitor. We thought you were gone. How are you, what happened? Jordan's eyes flicked toward Elon, their gaze filled with a mix of old familiarity and something new, a sharpness that sent a chill down Leo's spine. You thought I was gone. That was the plan. Jordan's lips curled into a small, almost rueful smile. But plans change. I had to disappear for a while, make some adjustments. Kira, still on edge, kept her hand near her weapon. This is insane. First, you disappear without a trace, and now you show up out of nowhere, just when things couldn't get worse. Jordan gave a soft laugh, but it lacked the warmth it once carried. I know this must be a shock. But trust me, I didn't come back for old time's sake. They turned their attention to Victor, who was still standing in the shadows, watching with an eerie calm. Victor. I see you're still trying to play your game. Victor's face darkened, his smile now replaced by a scowl. You should have stayed gone, Jordan. Now you've made this personal. Jordan didn't flinch. It was personal the moment you decided to pull me into your mess. You may think you control the game, Victor, but you're about to learn how wrong you are. Leo couldn't believe it. Jordan, their former comrade, had returned, but not as the ally they remembered. There was something darker in them now, something that suggested years of experience in the shadows. Leo knew that Jordan was no longer the same person he had once trusted, there was a coldness, a ruthlessness that had replaced the idealism they had shared. Jordan's eyes shifted to Leo. You've done well, Leo. You've fought hard, but you've been chasing shadows. Everything you think you know about this fight, it's all part of Victor's plan. Leo's mind raced. What did Jordan mean by that? Were they suggesting that their entire battle had been manipulated from the start? What do you mean? Leo demanded. What's been Victor's plan? Jordan took a deep breath, their eyes narrowing with a mix of regret and determination. You've been running in circles, Leo. The fight against Victor, it's not about power or control. It's about creating chaos. You're not the first people to challenge him, and you won't be the last. He's been manipulating everything, everyone, for years. All the alliances, the betrayals, the struggles, it's all part of his design. Elon shook his head, disbelief written all over his face. How is that possible? How could you not have known this? We've been fighting for freedom. Jordan's lips tightened. Freedom? No one has true freedom, Elon. Not anymore. Not when every move you make has already been anticipated. Every step you take is part of a game you don't even understand. They paused for a moment, their gaze distant. I thought I could change the system. I thought I could fight it from the inside. But I was wrong. Victor's voice cut through the tension. And now you've come to help them, Jordan. How naive. He stepped forward, his movements calculated. You think you can stop me? I've already won. Jordan's eyes narrowed, and their stance shifted, as if preparing for something. You haven't won, Victor. You've only created the illusion of victory. Leo stepped forward, his mind still reeling from the revelations. Then what do we do now? How do we stop him? How do we fight back? Jordan's gaze softened, just for a moment. The real fight is not with Victor. The real fight is against the system that has been controlling everything all along. It's not just him we need to defeat. It's the entire structure he represents. Kira's eyes narrowed. You're talking about dismantling everything. The power, the control, the order. You're suggesting we take down the whole system. Jordan nodded. Exactly. Victor is just a piece of the puzzle. He's a symptom, not the cause. The system he built is much larger than anything we've been able to see. But we have to break it. From the inside. Leo felt a shiver run down his spine. They had been fighting a war they didn't fully understand. And now Jordan was telling them that the enemy they had been focused on was just a distraction. The real battle was against an unseen force, one that had been pulling the strings all along. But how? Elon asked. How do we fight something this big? Jordan turned toward him, their face hardening. We fight by doing what we've always done. We fight with everything we have. But this time, we do it smarter. We find the cracks in the system, the ones Victor has overlooked, and we exploit them. Leo nodded slowly, the pieces starting to come together. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. But there was no turning back now. The war they were in wasn't just about survival, it was about revolution. It was about toppling the entire system. So, we take down the system? Kira asked, her voice steady but filled with a new determination. Jordan looked at her, their eyes filled with a mix of grim resolve and something else, perhaps hope. Yes. But it won't be easy. Victor won't go down without a fight, and neither will the system. But if we stand together, we might just have a chance. The weight of the task ahead pressed down on Leo, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had been fighting the wrong enemy all along. Now, with Jordan's return, they had a new goal, a new mission. The system that had controlled them for so long was about to be torn down. And Leo, Kira, Elon, and Jordan were going to lead the charge. The room was tense as Jordan's words hung in the air. It felt like the ground beneath them had shifted, and for the first time since they started this fight, Leo could see a flicker of something that resembled a clear path forward. But it wasn't just any path, it was a perilous one. A dangerous one. The kind of path that led through shadows, past old ghosts, and straight into the heart of the system they had spent years trying to destroy. So, what now? Kira's voice broke the silence, her tone steady, though the weight of the situation pressed on her as much as it did on the rest of them. We don't even know where to start. Jordan glanced at her, their eyes somber but resolute. We start with what we know. The people. The resistance has to be built from the ground up. But this time, it's not just about fighting. It's about unity, about giving people the tools they need to fight back, too. Elon leaned forward, his mind clearly turning over the strategy. And how do we do that? The system's too strong. We can't just march in there and expect to win. Jordan's lips curled slightly, almost as if they knew the question was coming. We start small. We find the cracks. And we exploit them. The system might be powerful, but it's also built on weakness. And those weaknesses are everywhere. Leo's mind raced as he thought about the many battles they had fought. Every victory they had gained, every defeat they had suffered, had all been part of a larger scheme. The fight against Victor, against the power that controlled them all, it wasn't a war they could win by brute force alone. It had to be strategic. You want us to rebuild the resistance from the ground up? Leo asked, meeting Jordan's gaze. Isn't that what we've been doing all along? Jordan's expression softened, but there was a sharpness to it, too. You've been doing it on a small scale. Now it's time to think bigger. We're not just taking down Victor. We're taking down the entire system. The people need to see it. They need to know they're not alone in this fight. Elon stood up, pacing back and forth as his mind worked through the logistics. We'll need resources, more fighters, safe houses, communications. And we'll need a network, something to tie all these pieces together. We'll need more than that, Kira interjected. We'll need the support of the people. The ones who've been silent, who've been living in fear. How do we convince them that there's hope? Jordan's eyes darkened for a moment, a flicker of something cold and calculating crossing their face. We show them. We give them a reason to believe in something other than survival. Hope is a powerful weapon, Kira. It's the one thing the system can't control. Leo absorbed their words, feeling the weight of responsibility press down on his shoulders. They had been living in the shadows, fighting just to stay alive. But now, they had a chance to lead something bigger, a real revolution. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. All right, Leo said, his voice firm. We'll do this. But we'll need to move quickly. The system won't take long to notice what we're doing. And when they do, they'll come after us harder than ever. Jordan nodded, their eyes scanning the room. The first step is to make contact with the scattered cells of resistance. Some of them have been dormant for years, but they're still out there. We need to unite them, form a network strong enough to challenge the system. We'll also need to find those who have been silenced, those who've been too afraid to fight. There are people. Kira, ever the strategist, was already thinking ahead. We'll need to be careful. We can't risk exposure, not yet. There are too many eyes on us. Leo could feel the tension building. The stakes were higher now. The system they had been fighting had grown more sinister, more widespread, than they had ever imagined. And now, they weren't just trying to survive, they were trying to dismantle everything. We'll need to set up communication lines, create secure routes, and find those who are willing to take the risk with us, Elon said, his voice a little calmer now that they had a plan. I'll work on the logistics, secure channels, encrypted messages, everything we need to keep things under wraps. Jordan nodded approvingly. Good. And we'll need people who can think on their feet, those who won't hesitate when it's time to act. Leo looked around at his team, his friends. They had come so far, but the road ahead was darker than anything they had encountered before. They were no longer just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for the future of everyone who had ever been oppressed by the system. And that responsibility weighed heavily on Leo's heart. We're all in this together, Leo said, his voice resolute. We build this resistance, we unite the people, and we show them that they can fight back. We give them the strength they need to tear down the system. Jordan stepped forward, their expression serious. And don't forget, Leo, this won't be easy. There will be betrayals. There will be sacrifices. But if we stand together, we might just have a chance. As Leo looked into Jordan's eyes, he saw the truth in their words. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for everything they had ever believed in. The resistance was no longer just a symbol. It was a movement, a revolution in the making. And Leo and his team were about to lead it. The weight of the task ahead sat heavily on Leo's shoulders. The plan to rebuild the resistance had begun in earnest, but the road to success was still shrouded in uncertainty. The system was vast and entrenched, and though they had a vision, bringing that vision to life required more than just ideals, it required action, allies, and a way to stay one step ahead. Leo sat in a dimly lit room with Kira, Elon, and Jordan. Maps and encrypted communication devices were sprawled across the table, each piece vital to their survival. The air was thick with anticipation, but also fear. They were about to make contact with cells of the resistance, some of whom had been out of reach for years. And they knew the risks. They knew the system would be watching. "We can't just contact everyone," Kira said, her eyes fixed on the map of the city. "If we spread ourselves too thin, we risk exposure. We need to prioritize." Jordan, standing near the window, nodded. "We focus on the strongest cells first. The ones that have experience, the ones that are still active. They'll help us expand." Elon leaned over the encrypted communicator, his fingers flying across the device's interface. "I've managed to get through to a few of them already, but we need to be careful. I'm going to send out messages, secure, untraceable, but we'll have to verify the responses. Not everyone can be trusted." Leo stared at the map, tracing the lines of resistance movements that were scattered throughout the country. Some were isolated, operating in the shadows. Others were on the brink of collapse, their leaders either captured or too scared to act. But there was still hope. There were still people out there who had the will to fight. "We've got to move quickly," Leo said, his voice filled with determination. "We can't wait any longer. The longer we stay hidden, the more the system can tighten its grip." Kira's expression hardened. "We move in waves. One cell at a time. First, we'll get in touch with those we know will be reliable. After that, we move on to the others. But if they hesitate, we move on. No time for indecision." Jordan smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "Kira's right. Trust is a luxury we can't afford. But when we build this network, we'll need to start thinking bigger. We need to reach out to those who are still afraid, those who are on the fence." Elon adjusted his glasses, frowning. "This won't be easy. Many of these groups have been isolated for years. If they've been silent this long, it's because they've lost hope. Convincing them to join forces with us is going to be a challenge." Jordan's eyes met Leo's, and there was something in their gaze, a shared understanding. It's not just about convincing them. It's about giving them a reason to believe again. We show them that fighting back isn't just possible, it's necessary. Leo nodded, the weight of Jordan's words sinking in. The network wasn't just about numbers or resources, it was about rekindling hope in the people who had been oppressed for so long. It was about building a force strong enough to challenge the system from the inside, one cell at a time. "We can't do this alone," Leo said, his voice steady. "We need to be a beacon for those who are afraid, who are lost. We have to show them that the resistance is more than just a fight, it's the beginning of a new world." The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Elon worked tirelessly to send out the encrypted messages to resistance groups, carefully verifying each response. Kira mapped out the routes for the communication lines, ensuring they remained secure. And Jordan, ever the strategist, offered guidance, directing the team as they built their plan for expansion. But it wasn't just the logistics that weighed on Leo. It was the understanding that every decision they made, every move they made, would shape the course of the rebellion. The network they were building would determine whether they had a chance at toppling the system or whether they would be crushed under its weight. "We've made contact with the first group," Elon said after what felt like an eternity, his voice tinged with both excitement and caution. "They're willing to meet. They'll come to our location in 3 days. Leo's pulse quickened. 3 days. That was all they had before the first alliance would begin to form. But that was only the first step. What would happen next? What would these people think when they saw the truth of the fight ahead? And the others? Kira asked, raising an eyebrow. What about the other cells? Elon glanced at the encrypted communicator. I've sent messages to several others. Some of them are more reluctant to respond, but I've got a few promising leads. We'll keep trying. Jordan turned to Leo, their gaze firm. Every day counts. We don't have the luxury of time. Every cell we contact is one more piece of the puzzle. But if we can unite them, if we can give them the tools to fight back, we can create a chain reaction that'll spread across the country. Leo stood up, his mind buzzing with the possibilities. It felt like they were standing at the edge of something monumental, something that could change the world. But that change came with consequences they weren't fully prepared for. We're going to need more than just strength, Leo said, his voice filled with quiet determination. We need unity. If we can't unite the people, we've already lost. Jordan's lips pressed together, a grim resolve crossing their face. Unity is hard to come by, Leo. But if anyone can do it, it's us. We've come this far. Now we finish what we started. As the team continued to work, making the final preparations for the arrival of their first group of allies, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something enormous. The fight was no longer just about survival, it was about creating a new world. A world where the system no longer controlled the fate of the people. And that world was within their reach. 3 days had passed since the encrypted messages went out, and the tension in the air was palpable. Leo paced back and forth in the makeshift command center, the room now cluttered with maps, documents, and various tech gadgets. It had been a whirlwind of preparation, strategizing, and waiting for their first group of allies to show up. Elon sat hunched over a laptop, his eyes glued to the screen as he monitored the secure communication channels. Kira was going over the latest intel, her sharp eyes scanning through the data for anything they might have missed. Jordan, as always, was silent, watching the room with the calm of someone who had seen it all before. Leo could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it. The first real test of their plan. The first step in uniting the scattered cells of resistance. If they failed here, it could be the end before they even got started. They're close, Elon said, breaking the silence. The first group is just about 20 minutes out. I've confirmed their location. No signs of any system interference, but we should be cautious. Kira leaned forward, her voice calm but determined. Do we know anything about them? Who are they, and what do they want? Elon hesitated before answering. The message I received indicated they're one of the older cells. Well established, with deep connections in some of the more industrial sectors. But they're cautious, understandably so. They've been in hiding for a long time, and trust is a luxury they can't afford. Jordan stood up, looking at Leo. The first meeting is always the hardest. They'll want assurances, proof that we're not just another group of dreamers. But we can't give them everything. Not yet. Leo nodded, steeling himself for the upcoming conversation. This wasn't just about forging an alliance, it was about showing these people that they could win. That they could rebuild what had been torn down. They were asking them to believe, to risk everything for a cause that had nearly died in the darkness. We show them who we are, Leo said, his voice firm. We show them that we've already fought the system and survived. But we don't beg them to join us. We offer them the opportunity to take a stand. As the minutes ticked by, Leo's heart pounded in his chest. Time seemed to slow down as they waited for the knock on the door. Finally, it came, a single, sharp rap that echoed through the room. It was time. Elon was the first to stand, moving quickly to open the door. A group of 4 entered, their eyes scanning the room with a mix of wariness and curiosity. They were dressed in dark, nondescript clothing, their faces hardened by years of living in the shadows. One of them, a woman with short black hair and piercing green eyes, stepped forward. "I'm Sarah," she said, her voice steady but cautious. "And this is my team. We're here to talk. But make no mistake, we're not interested in wasting time." Leo stepped forward to meet her, extending a hand. "Leo. These are my people, Kira, Elon, and Jordan. We're glad you're here." Sarah didn't take his hand, her gaze assessing him closely. "We'll see how long that lasts," she muttered, before turning her attention to the others in the room. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Leo could tell they were sizing each other up, each person wondering whether they were making the right decision. Sarah's eyes flicked toward the map of resistance cells on the wall, and for a moment, Leo could see the slightest flicker of recognition. "We've heard of you," Sarah said, her tone unreadable. "But that doesn't mean we trust you. You say you're building a network, but we've heard that song before. What makes you different?" Jordan stepped in before Leo could respond, her voice low but commanding. "We're not asking for your trust. We're asking for your action. We've already begun to take down pieces of the system. We've got the intel. We know where their vulnerabilities lie. But we can't do it alone. We need you." The woman, Sarah, scrutinized Jordan for a moment before turning to Elon, who was silently observing from the corner of the room. "You're the tech guy?" Sarah asked. Elon nodded, adjusting his glasses. "I handle communications and data. We've established encrypted channels, mapped out safe routes, and we're building the infrastructure for a larger network. But we need boots on the ground. We need people who are willing to fight. And we need people who can get us what we need: intel, supplies, support. People who know the system inside and out." Sarah paused, clearly weighing their words. Finally, she turned back to Leo, her expression still unreadable. "You want us to join your little crusade," she said, her voice flat. "What do you have to offer in return?" Leo didn't flinch. He'd known the question was coming, and he had an answer prepared. "We offer the chance to take the fight to the heart of the system. We offer a chance to win, to make a real difference. We've already seen what works, and what doesn't. The system has weaknesses, and we can exploit them. But we need your help to make that happen." The silence stretched out again, and Leo could feel the weight of Sarah's gaze on him. She was still skeptical, still uncertain. But something in her eyes softened as she looked around the room, at the people who were gathered here with him. They had a shared history, a history of fighting, surviving, and refusing to back down. Finally, Sarah spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "I'll take your offer. But we're not in this just for the fight. We're in it to win. If you can deliver, we'll work with you. But if you fail, we walk." Leo's heart raced with relief, but he knew better than to show it. They had just secured their first true alliance. But the real work was only beginning. "Agreed," Leo said, his voice steady. "We fight together, or we don't fight at all." Sarah nodded, and without another word, she motioned for her team to follow her as they moved to the back of the room, preparing to discuss the details of their collaboration. As the door closed behind them, Leo turned to his team. He could see the relief in their eyes, but also the recognition that this was just the first step. They had secured one cell. But there were more out there, more who would need convincing, more who would test their resolve. Kira looked at Leo, her expression serious. "We've got one foot in the door. But we can't stop here. We keep pushing. We find the next one, and we keep building." Elon nodded, already lost in thought, his fingers tapping against the table as he worked through the next steps. "The network's just starting. We'll need to be quick, careful, and ready for anything." Leo took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle back onto his shoulders. "We've got a chance. Let's not waste it." The days that followed the first meeting felt like a blur. Sarah's team had agreed to join forces, but the real work had only just begun. Leo and his team knew that gaining one cell was a significant achievement, but it was only a single step in a much larger journey. The battle they were facing wasn't just about winning small victories, it was about creating a network strong enough to dismantle the system, piece by piece. Leo sat at the center of the room, the flickering light of several monitors illuminating his face. Elon was hunched over a keyboard, sending out encrypted messages to more cells in the network. Kira was at the table, going over intel from Sarah's group, piecing together key strategies for future operations. Jordan, as always, was looking out the window, her gaze distant, as if weighing the future. "We've made contact with 2 more groups," Elon said, looking up from his screen. "One is in the northeast, near the industrial zones. The other is down south. Both have shown interest, but they're asking for more information. They want proof that we can win." Kira shot him a sharp look. "And you told them what?" Elon's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I told them what they needed to hear. That we've made progress. That we're not just a bunch of hopefuls looking to overthrow the system. We've got the knowledge. We've got the connections. And we've got people who've already proven themselves." Jordan spoke up from the window, her voice calm but forceful. "The problem isn't just convincing them. It's showing them that this isn't a one-time thing. This is an ongoing effort. We need to make them believe in the long game." Leo turned toward her, nodding. "Exactly. We can't offer them a quick fix. We can't promise them that tomorrow the system will fall. But what we can give them is hope, and a strategy to make that hope a reality." Elon tapped his fingers against the desk. "The challenge is scaling. Getting more groups to join us while keeping everything under wraps. We've already reached a dozen groups, but they're all scattered across the country. The risk of exposure grows every time we reach out." Leo clenched his jaw. "Then we have to move faster. We can't afford to wait. We need to show them we have the ability to take action, and we need to do it now." Kira raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we launch an operation? Something small, just to show them we mean business?" Leo's gaze hardened. "Exactly. A targeted strike. Something we can handle, but that sends a clear message. If we can disrupt one of their key operations, even for a short time, we'll prove we can strike back. Prove that we're not just a bunch of dreamers." Jordan turned from the window and glanced at the map on the wall. "We've got intel on several vulnerable targets, supply lines, communication hubs, some of their smaller outposts. Which one are you thinking?" Leo stood up and walked to the map, his finger tracing the lines of the system's network. "We target one of their communication hubs. If we take out their ability to communicate quickly, they'll scramble. It'll give us time to make our next move." The room fell silent as they all considered the plan. It was bold, risky, and would require precision, but it was the type of move they needed to make if they wanted to prove their strength and, more importantly, build trust within the resistance. Elon broke the silence. "I can hack into their network and cause a temporary disruption. I'll need about 24 hours to set everything up, but it's doable." Kira nodded. "I'll organize the team and make sure we have everything we need. We'll need to move quickly once we get the signal." Jordan's expression grew more serious. "This won't be without consequences. They'll retaliate. They'll find out who did it, and they'll come after us. We have to be prepared for that." Leo looked at his team, their faces resolute. He knew the risks, but he also knew that without taking these risks, they would never get anywhere. "Then we prepare for the fallout," Leo said, his voice calm but firm. "We do this right, and we'll show them what we're capable of. It's time to push forward." The team began to spring into action, each person taking on their role. Elon immediately dove into setting up the necessary systems for the hack. Kira started making calls, ensuring they had everything in place for the operation. Jordan began coordinating with Sarah's team, ensuring they would be ready to assist in the aftermath. As the hours ticked by, Leo's mind raced. This wasn't just about a small mission, it was about proving to themselves and to the rest of the world that they could make a difference. They could win. And if they could pull this off, it would be the catalyst they needed to galvanize the rest of the cells into action. When the time came, everything fell into place. Elon's systems were in place, the team was prepped, and they had the perfect window of opportunity. The communication hub they were targeting was vulnerable, a key node that controlled communication between several of the system's smaller outposts. Taking it down would send a shockwave through the system, disorienting them and buying the resistance precious time. At the crack of dawn, the team set out. The operation itself was swift and efficient. Elon's hack disrupted the communication grid, sending the system into chaos. Kira's team moved in quickly, securing the location and ensuring that their presence remained undetected. It was over before the system even had time to react. For a moment, as they sat in the aftermath, the weight of the mission lifted. They had succeeded. They had proven that they could strike back, that they could hit the system where it hurt. But Leo knew this was just the beginning. The resistance was building momentum, but with every victory came the risk of retaliation, and the system would not go down without a fight. As they left the operation site and made their way back to their base, Leo couldn't help but feel the adrenaline course through him. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for. The push forward had begun. And no matter what came next, they would face it together. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?